Hello, my name is Ivan Taylor, and I'm from Policy Dynamics in Ontario, Canada. And I'd like to present today some work that myself and some colleagues are doing on the Sustainable Development Goals. We built a system dynamics model showing how we can reach the sustainable development goals in any country in the world. But today we're going to talk about how this model could be applied to Canada. And I have three co-authors, and Tak Ono is a student at the University of Bergen. And myself, I'm the senior scientist at Policy Dynamics. And Suraj Kul is a professor of supply chain management at Carleton University. And Bunmi Falabita is in Nigeria, and she was working at the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research. So they've been working with me for a number of months now on this model, and we hope to have a publication sometime soon. So as background, the United Nations has defined 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they have what they call a 2030 agenda, which was approved by all UN members in 2015. Now we have looked at this Sustainable Development Goals framework, and we found that the Sustainable Development Goals are lagging indicators, and so it's not clear how you can use them to forecast into the future. So this approach, we use system dynamics to try to rectify that problem and determine how the SDGs can help in planning and prioritizing future policies. Well, here's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They cover a wide range of development issues in a country, and there's 17 of them, and each one of them has a number of sub goals. And those sub goals are more quantitative. And the goals themselves are given a score, which is more of a qualitative measure between 0 and 100, where 100 is good and 0 is poor. And the qualitative score for the Sustainable Development Goals is based on a roll-up of the more quantitative measures in the sub-goals. And then each country is given an overall score for the country in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. And many leaders of countries, when they meet at international meetings, like to discuss how they're moving amongst the other countries in the rankings of countries in their score. So it's an important issue for many leaders of countries to show that they're making progress in sustainable development. So the purpose of this model and this presentation is to assess future projections for informed decision-making, prioritizing, and planning. So as I said, the Sustainable Development Goals are lagging indicators, and we want to use system dynamics to project into the future and possibly support this kind of policy making by leaders in each country that we apply it to. The methodology was that we used some sources to look at the connections between the SDGs. One of the sources was LeBlanc 2015, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. We also looked at a causal loop diagram that was developed by Ferrari and Seti, and that was done in 2018. And then we translated the causal loop diagram into a stock and flow model, and I'll show you how we did that. And then we calibrated the model using historical data from the Sustainable Development Reports from 2017 to 2022. And then we projected the scores into the near future using the calibrated model, assuming that nothing changes in terms of policy between from 2022. And then we constructed or conducted a constrained optimization to try to maximize the future scores. This model can be applied to any country in the world, and I've shown it in a number of presentations to a number of different countries, such as in the Latin American Systematics Conference and in the South African Systematics Conference. So I think this is a general model, and I think it could be useful in many countries. So this is the network diagram that LeBlanc did in 2015. And you can't really see it very clearly, but the large circles are the Sustainable Development Goals. The colored circles are there's 17 of them. And then you can see that they're connected by smaller circles. And those are what they call the targets or the sub-goals inside the main goal, the bigger circle. And so you can see that each of the goals is connected to the other goals through the different targets or the different sub-goals. So we found this useful for connecting the goals together in a causal loop diagram and in a systematics model. This is the causal loop diagram developed by Ferry and Sedia. And it's hard to read, but basically you can see some things here. You can see the different goals, and you can see that they're connected together with polarities. And so a positive polarity means that that the two are the cause. If the cause goes up, if this goal at the tail of the arrow goes up, then it affects the goal at the head of the arrow in the same direction. So if the tail goes up, the head goes up in a positive connection, and if the tail goes down and the head goes down in a positive direction. Similarly, a negative connection would be that if the goal at the tail of the arrow goes down, the goal at the head of the arrow goes up, and if the goal at the tail of the arrow goes up, the goal at the head of the arrow goes down. So that's what a negative connection means and a positive connection means, and those are important for building a system dynamics model. So here's another presentation of the causal loop diagram, which is maybe easier to read. We can see this SDGs in the rows and the SDGs in the columns, and basically a plus sign means that they're connected positively or they move in the same direction, and a minus sign says that they're connected negatively or move in the opposite direction. So this is I think a cleaner way to present a complex causal loop diagram, and we're finding it useful in our work. Another aspect of this presentation is that I think a lot of social scientists can relate to this kind of presentation because it looks somewhat similar to a correlation matrix. And you have, positive and negative correlations. However, we have to be clear that this is not correlation, this is causation. So for example, there's different polarities in this. So for example, in SDG 3 has a negative effect on SDG 2, but SDG 2 has a positive effect on SDG 3. So this is actually a balancing loop here between these two SDGs. They're not moving in the same direction. So this is a causal connection, not a correlation. here's how we developed the system dynamics model in terms of stocks and flows. So we modeled each SDG as a stock in system dynamics language, which is the thing that's accumulating over time, and we measured it in terms of a scale of 0 to 1, where 0 was poor and 1 was good. And then we have a flow, which is primarily the way the score changes over time. And the concept we primarily used here was a goal gap paradigm, where we have a target and a time to change. And over time, the goal score will move towards the target. So this is what they call a goal gap model. And so the other idea we had was that these SDGs, as I said, are connected together. And what we used was the progression in the SDG as a way of connecting the goals together. So the progression is the ratio of the current goal score against the initial goal score. So that could be going up, or it could be going down. So it could be greater than 1 if the goal score is increasing compared to the initial, or it could be less than 1 if the goal score is decreasing. And then we connect that to the target, which is defined by the government of the day as the goal that they're trying to achieve. But that goal that they're trying to achieve will be inhibited or enhanced by other SDGs and how they're related. So this is the way the SDGs are connected. And then the last thing is this multiplier, which is this tool that we use in our model, which allows us to look into the future and say, how can we improve things in the future from the status quo? The multiplier, we will talk about that in terms of something called effort, which is a combination of people, time, money, and resources. It's an abstract idea, and the more effort that's applied, the greater the impact on the positive improvement of the SDG. But in the status quo situation, we assume the multiplier is 1, and so we will look at future effort allocations that are greater than 1 to try to have the greatest improvement on the SDG scores. So here's the projections for Canada if there is no change in the policies from 2022. So as I often say to people that are unfamiliar with system dynamics can tell you where you are, for example, in 2022, and how you got there, for example, from 2017 to 2022, and where you're headed if nothing changes. So for example, till 2026. And if you don't like where you're headed, system dynamics can help you try to get to a better future. So by changing the structure of the model, or the structure of the system, I should say. So in this case, you can see that this SDG is not doing well, and a couple other SDGs are not doing projected to do well in the future. So that's the SDGs 1 to 9. And then this is SDGs 10 to 17. And of particular interest is this light blue curve, which represents SDG 13, which is climate action. So we can see that Canada is not doing very well in the area of climate action. So this other darker blue line here is decreasing substantially too, and that is inequality. So the model is projecting that the inequalities in income in Canada will be getting worse in the next few years. So here's the projected scores. So this is the score in 2017 for each of the individual SDGs from 1 to 9, and this is the score in 2022, and you can see some of the scores are going up and some of them are going down. And then this is the score that we project for 2026, and you can see that most of these are going down. And in particular, you can see that affordable and clean energy is very low we project in 2026. And then if you look at the next 8 SDGs from 10 to 17, we see that reduced inequalities has dropped quite considerably in our projections. And also climate action is very low we project in 2026. And it has been decreasing over the past few years. So what we decided to do was our model will now try to allocate effort or more extra effort to the different SDGs to try to maximize the minimum SDG. So in this case, it's SDG 13 is the minimum value, and we're going to allocate resources to a constrained amount of resources to improving SDG 13. And what we'll see is that there's a number of synergies involved with the other SDGs. So if we were to allocate effort to improve SDG 13, we would allocate 20%, 26% of the effort to climate action, to SDG 13. But notice we would allocate 49% of the effort to affordable and clean energy, SDG 7. And we'll also allocate some effort to some of the other SDGs. But I think it's interesting to note that that our effort to change climate change was also necessary to provide affordable and clean energy. Here's now the results of this extra effort, and you can see that even though we're primarily focused on affordable and clean energy and climate action, many of the other SDGs also begin to increase where they were decreasing before, and that's because of the positive synergies between the SDGs in our causal loop diagram. There are still some SDGs that are declining, but most of the SDGs are now increasing, projected to increase until 2026. So that's SDGs 1 to 9, and here's SDGs 10 to 17, and you can see that climate action has now reversed and gone quite a bit higher than before. One thing to note as well is that climate action eventually in the projection is no longer the minimum SDG score, and that it's replaced as the minimum is replaced by a different value. So the effort will be transferred from one SDG to another. Here's the results of the projections when we have no change and when we apply this effort. So we can see here that most of the SDG scores with effort have increased substantially from the no change scenario. So you see, in particular, affordable and clean energy has increased quite significantly from the previous projection. And here we have climate action increasing quite considerably from the no effort, no change scenario, and similarly, reduced inequalities has improved quite a bit. That's because of the synergies in the system. We actually didn't devote any effort to reducing inequalities, but by improving the other other SDGs, we actually were able to reduce inequalities. Notice one thing here that that responsible production and consumption actually has declined a little bit with the effort that's expended on climate action and affordable and clean energy. Possibly that would mean that it's more difficult to provide responsible and production and consumption when we're also trying to reduce the climate or improve climate action and provide affordable and clean energy. So that's an interesting idea, that there are trade-offs involved in the future projections, and that it's not a an overall improvement for everything. Here's the graph for the minimum values, and you can see the historical relationship till 2022, and then in 2023 we have the policy of effort being applied, and we can see that that without the effort, with no change, the status quo is the red line here that continues to fall. And with effort, we see that we get a rapid increase in the score for the minimum. But notice this kink in the result, because this is where the SDG 13 is no longer the minimum, and it changes to a different SDG as being the minimum after this point in 2024. So just to wrap up the presentation, we looked at Canada, and we looked at a model of the SDGs over time, and we found that our model could project into the future, and we found that 12 of the SDGs for Canada were showing a decreasing trend in the near future. And the poorest performing SDG was SDG 13, climate action. And then when we decided to try to optimally improve the minimums SDG score, that is climate action, we would allocate 26% of our effort to climate action, but also we'd allocate 49% of our effort to affordable and clean energy. And this would result in only 2 of the SDGs still having a decreasing trend. However, it would lead to a slight problem with responsible consumption and production, which would not increase as much as before. There are some limitations to this approach. For example, we have limited historical data, only from 2017 to 2022. So we felt that it was not possible to project very far into the future with this very limited amount of data. And also another issue is that the SDG report is published every year, and the model would need to be recalibrated every year, and might produce different results. That may not be so much of a problem, because governments generally have budgets and policies that change every year. So it might be very valuable for a national policymaker to get an update of the model and see where the effort needs to be expended in the future to get the best results, or at least for the next year to get the best results. The other issue is that the government of the day must determine the actual policy changes and programs that need to be implemented to improve the specific SDGs. So we basically have this abstract idea of effort, which is not, it's not clear exactly how that effort would be applied to improve the SDGs, but possibly we could look into the sub-goals as we described in the graphics, that maybe by applying some of the effort in certain sub-goals would be possible to develop programs and policy changes to improve the score of the goal. So by digging deeper into the sub-goals, we might be able to determine actual policies. And then the last thing is that SDGs may have varying responses to the same amount of effort. And so we're now working on an idea that in the current program, we assume that each SDG is given equal weight in terms of its response. But we're now working on an idea where where it may be more difficult to change the score of one SDG than another. So we're looking at some kind of a sufficient effort that would be necessary to make the changes in the SDGs, and then we'll have a slightly different approach to allocating effort when each SDG has a different response to the effort. So future work is, as I said, considering the difficulty of changing the SDGs, and that's future work that we hope to do in the very near future. Assess different optimization goals. Like we said, we maximize the minimum goal, but we might want to say maximize the average goal or the median goal. So there's other ways we could approach this optimization idea. And then project farther into the future. So the SDGs are supposed to be for the 2030 agenda. So we might like to project to 2030 and see if that can help countries, and then apply it to more countries. As I said, I'm presenting this in many different places, and I hope that we can demonstrate how this model could be useful for policymakers and help prioritize effort to improve the quality of life for a country's citizens. Here's selected references that we used in the work, and like I said, we hope to have a book chat, a journal article or out in the near future. And if you want to get in touch with me, maybe I could send you an addition, a copy of it. So here's my email address and my co-authors' email addresses, so you can contact me in the future if you want more information or if you want to apply this to your country. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ivan.
Did you want to have some questions now, or what?
So 2 slides you have made an improvement. And it was very clear that on the polarity today, that was a change.